Oh, hello, mystery writers. Welcome to Mystery Fix. And today we're talking about creating an audiobook of your mystery. And we're talking with a talented performance artist, and narrator, Jonathan Waters. Welcome, John.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's a
Oh,
pleasure.
it's a pleasure on my side, too. So many authors are thinking about creating audiobooks, and today I thought we could just talk about working with your narrator. What from a narrator's perspective, what are you looking for in an author?
Well, I'm looking for certainly someone who definitely knows their work. In the sense of, if you look at film, if you look at people who direct for a living, they have to know their story. It's the same idea with someone who's an author. And if you're going to be giving more or less light direction to your narrator about your story. Now, I'm not saying you got to be jazzed about it, just being, just like, oh, this is this, and da, 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 da. You totally can be. But I enjoy seeing someone who knows the story, who knows the curves, who knows every character. And especially, too, being a narrator, you're coming into it mostly on all on an audio level, as well as trying to tell the best story that you possibly can. And so you have your characters, you have your moments where you want to speed up, you have your moments where you want to slow down, but that comes with learning the territory of being a narrator. But most of this comes from good communication. I want this to feel, as the author, going like, I want this to feel like this. I need this to feel like that, etc. And the more open and honest the communication is between both parties, certainly the better it's going to be. Just something as simple as pronunciation, which we ran into a couple of times, of certain characters and things, which falls under Roman stories of historical fiction, fantasy, even regular names of John Smith, Jen Smith, whatever. But it's good to see from my perspective of what story I'm about to hop into, because there's a lot of work that goes into doing an audiobook, and having someone there who is not necessarily a net, but someone who is there to make sure that if I'm off in my own interpretation of this story, that they're there to listen to it and go, oh, wait, I think this, or I felt I wrote this in this way. And not that I'm the one to be like the editor going like, well, it's kind of reading like this, so
right.
Don't do that, other narrators who may or may not be listening to this. So, I mean, as almost as organized as the author can make themselves, to go like, this character sounds like this character sounds like that, is immensely helpful. Or if you're, a writer who does something just like, I just want a straight read, which makes my job super easy, because then I don't have to think about accents or higher, lower, raspy, mousy, whispery, whatever qualities I want to add to this particular instrument. I don't have to worry about it that much. But
I think in production, actually, I haven't told anyone yet this. I work with Jonathan, and we did the audio book version of the Roman Heir, which is part of the Argolicus mystery series. And there were a lot of unfamiliar names to pronounce.
Yes.
And along with the pronunciation is a brief description. I gave a brief description of each character's, attitude, I think I would call it. So there's like a 19-year-old girl. She's really still a teenager. And things like that without doing a whole background thing, of the whole character background, but just enough for your narrator to know kind of how to interpret that character within the story. I think that I think that really helps a lot, because otherwise you're going to have a cold read, and that character isn't there. I have to say that one of my personal delights was in the Argolicus mysteries. Argolicus has his tutor, who is his sidekick,
Oh, him.
Nicholas,
Yeah.
and Jonathan just came up with a perfect voice, and I
That's
was
sweet.
like, "Oh, this is so amazing!" I always wondered what Nicholas sounded like, and voila, there he was. And so
I
I
can
just want to
probably
let
do
you
it
know
for
that you're going to have some great surprises when you do an audiobook of, of that character really coming to life.
you.
Character just really coming to life, and in ways that you didn't expect. That was just an amazing surprise to me. This is my first audiobook, so
I'm glad I brought him to life for you.
yeah, you did.
I mean, in the end, as an author, you did just perfectly fine. It's almost like a casting call sheet, like
It is.
for a play or something. Be like, this guy is 46. He's doing this. He's like that. Perfect. That's
It is like that. I hadn't thought of that before, but that's exactly like,
Mhm.
when you're in a script and you're like, John, 34, medium height, blah, 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 got
Right.
a snarky attitude or whatever it is,
Right.
First time you introduce a character in a script, that's exactly what you do. So that's a good way to put it. So when you're getting ready to produce your audiobook, you want to get that information together about all your characters, so you can give it to the narrator so they have an idea of each of the characters. And I'm telling you, if you have a number of characters in your story, it's a bit of a job.
Yes, it is a bit of a job. I for most books, I kind of have to almost do it myself, and I have a little just notepad here of like, here's the character, and here's
Ah,
like
okay.
my own notes about things. Because some folks either don't care too much, or they put it in the book itself of kind of what they are. If they really care about it, they'll put it out there of like, they sound like this. But most of the time so far, people have been like, go forth, make voices for these people. And thank God so far it's been, hey, all right, cool. Because I've never, so far, knock on wood, I've never gotten to the end of a book going and, had a main character or something be like, you did him as British, but we were hoping you'd do him as Southern. Yeah.
He's from Georgia.
No.
Yeah, well, so it's just enough. It's just a hint. It is very much like casting call for film,
Mm,
because you give the hint, and then it is the performance artist's job to do that interpretation.
right.
Yeah, so you want to give them a hint without laying down the rules, because that's restrictive.
Right.
Um, and so just giving those little brief character outlines, uh, or certain speech things that certain particular characters may have, you
Right.
can put those in your character notes. But
Mm.
I think it's a great guideline for the narrator, because who wants to do the same stuff over and over again because
Right.
that character didn't come out right. If you're giving the guidelines from the beginning, it's a lot easier to work with.
Right. Another thing
So
that just piqued my mind. There's
what?
also I've told other authors and things that I've worked for that they're essentially in the director's seat, and this just popped into my mind of like how things kind of go. Like I'll finish my work and I'll send it off to you to kind of give, like, I go my once over and you get the like final say of like how things go. Um, but just as kind of like maybe something that most writers don't know is that we dumb actors are pretty sensitive and fragile individuals. And so whenever getting notes back, it's always nice to kind of use slightly flowery language whenever trying to get corrected. But
Beautiful.
on the other end of that spectrum, if you need to give a note, something as severe as say like you didn't do this, say this line correctly, say something like "Hi, how are you?" or something. The thing that'll turn hopefully any narrator off from you forever is to give them a line reading. If, say, the author is like, "No, do it like this." "Hi, how are you?" All of a sudden, you'll get that narrator going like, "Oh, okay, I'll spell it out for you." But if you, so this becomes this conversation, and there's books and documentaries and all sorts of fun stuff that authors can look at and go like, "Oh, I'm talking to another person." But what I've always found is actors somehow love problems in a weird sort of way. For example, like, say you have a scene with two people, and you have something as simple as like, you two are clearly fighting, you're doing this, you're trying to keep the relationship together, but you're coming at it different ways. Here's your problem. Get a hug from her. With what you're saying, get a hug from her. "Oh, okay." And then we figure that out. We love that. For some backwards ass reason, we love that sort of thing. And, so you can be simple with it, being like, I think this needs a bit more sadness in there. Can we get a sadder take in there? That's perfectly fine. But
We did that with the last line of the book. Just needs
yes,
a little bit of iron.
And I was like, all right, we can do that. No problem. But I've heard horror stories of certain directors going like, all right, that was great. That was perfectly fine. But I need 30% happier, but 15% sadder. Like, I don't, what does that look like? I don't understand. Because you're building the world, you're building the story, and everyone, you get to be a fly on the wall as someone who's listening to the audiobook. So you got to have it sound good and get behind these characters, like, he's just trying to love you or something. So yeah, as word to the wise to authors, be gentle with us, but communicative, I guess.
I think the way the authors can relate to that is getting note backs from your editor.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Of just like, this whole paragraph, it doesn't make sense.
A gentle editor, you're much more likely to listen to their suggestion than someone who rips your story apart.
Right.
So,
this is wrong, that's wrong, this is bad, why do you even have this? This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so I think that's a way that authors can relate to being gentle with you. It's actually not even being gentle, it's really being truly professional.
Right. Things like, this part was unclear. Oh, okay. I need to take a look at that. Yeah. Okay. Easy peasy, So yeah, let's see. What else? That's about where I got from most of my narrators, or excuse me, authors and things for what they do. Because for me, mostly they haven't been superbly involved. A lot of the times it's been like, here's your handoff, and I'm like, okay. But I always try to put that communication forward. I try to put a note out there of like, hey man, this is your book. You put your heart and soul into this in whatever way, shape, and form. So I'm here for your vision. And so I give them the options of like, do you want a straight read? Do you want characters? And if you want characters, what are they? Do you care what they sound like? Do you want my interpretation? And most of the time they're like, oh, you just go. You go for it, buddy. Like, I don't know if they're overwhelmed or whatnot, but it's just kind of that sort of thing. And I mean, sometimes some folks will be like, this person's a this person's a that. But it's strange to me, like, sometimes these authors are just, I picked you, and clearly somehow you have range, so I am putting all faith into your hands and your audible rating. Yeah.
That's really great. That is really great. So since we're here and we're looking at you in part of your studio, tell everybody about what they're seeing and why it's important.
Okay, so what you see here is a Rode, and I should know the number of this because there's like microphone nerds out there of like, this is a Rode X374S model G whatever thingy. I got this at a Guitar Center after I've upgraded once. I've been narrating for 8 years since 2011. And before I was using just this little desk mic thing that didn't look too dissimilar to this. And it was working perfectly fine. I use GarageBand to narrate everything I've been doing with various sets and
Mhm.
softwares and things to make sure it worked. And I learned that by watching a YouTube vid of this like English guy going like, well, you just click here and you'll sound exactly like me. And I went, oh my God, I do. And it sounded amazing. And so I could get kind of by that whole thing and make myself sound narrator wise, because I've always loved voiceover and narrating and so on. And so I figured this was the way kind of in. What you're seeing behind me is those foam things you put on a mattress sometimes if it's too hard or whatever.
Right.
That stuff. Because it is much cheaper than that nice black, sound foam, whatever things. This is exactly the same stuff. I mean, essentially. And what it does, sound moves in waves, right? And so if it hits like a plain wall like those behind you, it's tempted to bounce off and come back, and it might be caught by this. I'm really good at writing and speaking. And if it's caught by this, you might get like a slight echo in the back, and it doesn't sound nearly as good as it should. And everybody who hears it goes like, this isn't as good as this other audiobook or this professional thing that I heard. So what this does is when you speak, it basically hits this and just dies a very hopefully peaceful death. And I have this all around kind of the room a little bit. I should put up more because it's kind of been sparse and like strategically placed. But what I'm currently looking at, I have these 3 thick blankets that are hanging by thumbtacks, hanging from my ceiling that help to kind of insulate and deaden this sound to make me sound much better than I would be being in like an empty room, just speaking, because it would sound like if you were checking out a new house, you can hear that echo, and that isn't conducive to a good sounding audiobook where you want to be, this is the voice. That's all you want to hear. You don't want to hear anything outside of it, such as like downstairs neighbors who I am currently dealing with, or cats that I currently have. But it's there to make sure that the sound is as good as it possibly can. I have a little red mixer thing in here, which is all it does is just take this sound. I don't know what that was. Take this cord here and just basically pipes it into the computer. And I have a little knob here, which I might mess with a little bit just to see how loud or soft I get. But beyond that, that's where it is. It's pretty simple. There isn't like a giant board back here where I'm like 1,600 dials,
Right.
whatnot. I should potentially in the future, but for now, for the productions that I'm doing and where I'm still very much learning how to do bigger and better and more versatile productions, this is good enough for me, and it's pretty good comparatively to most other folks, because you can spend $4,000 on a mic, which would be fantastic, but not everybody has that kind of money. And even so, it might not be the mic for you, as I'm learning from listening to various podcasts about voiceover and stuff, because sometimes you can find this mic and it might be perfect for you. I don't know if this one necessarily is the one that I'm going to be like, this is the final one. But it certainly does bring out my voice quite a bit. And I like it currently right now. And eventually I will get a setup where I walk into some like very quiet hush room and seal the door and all there is foam around me. But until then, this is kind of the like put together a studio that I have, and it works just fine for us, for me, for the authors that pick me.
Right. Let's talk about a finished hour versus how many hours a finished hour takes for a narrator, because I think that's an important thing for authors to understand, that that the narrator doesn't just sit down and read, a chapter that takes 15 minutes and
Right.
it's a done deal. So tell us a little bit about what it takes to get that finished hour of production.
Sure. So depending on the book, so for example, if you have something like an autobiography versus high fantasy, or a mystery for that matter, the difference between the two, you have an autobiography, which is one voice, one guy, one person going through stuff. For me, and I probably shouldn't, your best practice is to always read the book first, because otherwise you'll run into that problem of like, ooh, he was Southern, sorry, at the end of the book. But the reason for that is you want to pre-read the book is just to be prepared for your own mind to go, oh, okay, this is going to happen. I can kind of build the suspense here. I can build the pace, the tone, the whatever, leading up to this moment in chapter 3. These little subtle things you can mess with. So where a mystery and a high fantasy I would pre-read before, an autobiography potentially not. That kind of cuts the time a bit. But for that hour, chapter 1, say it's an hour long, I've read that chapter, so say it takes an hour to read that chapter, just me sitting there reading. I'm not exactly a speed reader. My wife is like a 500 words per minute person. I am not. I wish I were. I could get so much done, but I basically read at the pace that I speak, basically. And for me, that's me just going like, I want to enjoy this story, as opposed to like nuke my way through a novel. And then it becomes the sit here and do it. And I hope I can be explicit on here, but maybe not. When I'm sitting here, I have on my screen, much like anybody watching this, a PDF of it. I have my GarageBand kind of in the background. And I'm just reading it sentence by sentence, bit by bit, trying to remember who said what where, with my little notepad of who sounds like what, to remind myself, oh, he sounds like this. Okay. And, you'll find like I have to be word perfect. I have to sound good. I can't trip over my words mid-sentence because that's not a good audiobook. And anybody who reads is like, oh, I'm a good reader. Well, try reading aloud. And then anytime you mess up on something, you got to hop back. You got to take that sentence back. And especially if you're a fast reader, that is terrible for narration. Not just saying it's like you shouldn't do it. It's just bad for the third step of it, which is editing out all those fun errors that you've done. So if you're a fast reader of just and somewhere in that middle of that long tangent you fuck up, you got to go all the way back to where there was somewhere of a break. Whereas someone who reads it kind of slow at a leisurely pace, you can easily hop back in your editing process and fix that moment, and you're back to the races again. So,
and this is all stuff that happens way before the author gets that.
Yeah, before you even see it.
That's right, because then if the author has suggestive changes, you need to go back. You need to be able to go back in also and make those little tweaks without redoing the whole hour-long thing.
Please no. So say hour of reading, probably an hour and 20 minutes ish, maybe hour 15 of actual sitting there recording. And speaking for an hour and 15 minutes, just before coming on here, I did an hour and 20 minutes of a different book. It hurts a little bit. And I should be, you should as a narrator warm up beforehand just to do vocal exercises and things. So that might add to the time of like, it's 5 to 15 minutes of just making sure you are hydrated, making sure that this thing is working more or less. And then finally comes the editing process. And for a while there, I was just trying to listen through the whole thing. And that takes a long time. It takes a long time to do that. But during the recording process, what I'll do, and I was like, this is a brilliant idea, is that whenever I mess up, I do this little click sound. So in the
Oh,
in
so you can search for
in
it?
the waveform. Yeah, I just take it in 10-second chunks, and whenever I see like a couple of really skinny lines, I'm like, oh, I messed up here. Fix. Okay, good, great, moving. And it saves me about, I don't know, it probably saves me about half an hour of stuff to do. Now, that being said, I will still send it off to you, and I will go like, listen, I'm going to need you to listen to this. One, just for your directorial debut or your thoughts on this, and two, to catch some of these mistakes that I may have missed. Now, they might not have been necessarily those little pop sounds. They might have been a pronunciation thing that how could I have possibly caught? They might have been like, oh, this sentence and this sentence, they're a little too far apart. Can we put them together? Or the other way, these two are like really close together. Can you spread those out? Things that I might just not catch. Things that you hearing it and listening to it as being the first audience member get to be privy to and enjoy in some way. And the thing on the author's end, which helps us narrators out, is if you put a timestamp and where what messes up, I can knock out an hour's worth of whatever chapter that thing is, depending on how many notes you give me.
So
Pretty
I'm going
quick.
to tell everybody what a timestamp is.
Oh, it is the time of the error. So, for example, you'll have, like on a YouTube video, like the one you're watching now, you'll see it's been 9 minutes and 35 seconds. Oh, that'd be cool if it was just about right there. You'll see that. And if you hear someone go like, and the quick brown, sneeze or something, you can go, hey, at 9:34, you sneeze. Like, you're going to need to fix that.
Right. I just wanted everybody to know what that meant,
Right.
and that it's easy to do when you're listening to the audio that the narrator sends you. It's all streams along at the time, so it's really easy to send that information if you do have something that you note that you want to change.
Right.
It's easy to just send them, that's it, at 9 minutes and 14 seconds,
Yeah.
we need to fix this.
Because
So,
there's nothing worse than getting a note going like, I didn't really like you messed up somewhere in chapter 4. Be like, uh, okay.
oh, where?
I've done that. I've had that a couple of times where like, hey, this
Oh,
line,
wow.
you messed up on this line. And I can go hunting for it, but I'd rather not. If it
Right.
saves me
So
10
I
minutes.
think it
Yeah.
all comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning is communication
Right.
and staying open on both sides.
Yes, exactly.
Staying open actually facilitates coming out with the best audiobook possible. And
Right.
Jonathan, I see we are running out of time.
Oh no.
So I know we could go on. I could go on with you for a really long time, but just for our viewers, I'd like to bring it to a close and ask you if you have one last tip for authors working with a narrator.
One last tip. Be excited about the work, man. Like, be up and ready to be like, hey, I did this thing and you're here to help me out and we're gonna do this and do that. Because I'll like this sort of interaction never happens. Like, thanks for the book, bud, and off we go. I think this is a great marketing thing. I think getting this stuff kind of out there and thinking outside the box, man, of just, oh, we could do this, we could do that, we could talk about these things. And then you start getting a face to a name, you get a voice to a face to a name, and then writing to a voice to a name to a face, all those fun things.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. I was actually watching somewhere that there was an author who has different series,
yeah,
and she uses different narrators for each series just because the voice of one narrator fits with that series and the voice of another narrator fits with that series. And so I think it's really important for authors to be clear about the voice that is narrating your story,
right,
which is different than unless your story is told in the first person, in which case that voice is going to be the protagonist.
right,
But if you're writing in the third person, there's a voice, there's the challenge for the narrator of interpreting your characters, and we talked about that earlier. But there's also the challenge of narrating your story and bringing across the tone of your story and how you want that story told. So I think when you're choosing your narrator for your book, you want to keep that in mind. Is it isn't just that, oh, they'd be great as Jeb Smith.
Right.
You've got to carry the whole entire story.
Right. Yeah.
So, John, thank you so much. This has been just terribly informative, and I know so many authors are thinking about doing audiobooks, and I haven't seen an interview with a narrator about working with the author. I've seen the one side or the other side, but that I think this is a great opportunity for narrators to show their skills,
right.
because it is a definite skill. We were talking before we went live about how narrating a book is sort of like acting, but it's different from acting because there's that voice and tone, that narration that carries the story as well as interpreting the different characters within the book.
Right.
So, John, thank you so much for sharing all your time and information with the other authors.
Well, thank you. I'd be happy to do it again sometime. Hope
Okay,
maybe they can get in contact with me if they can.
Okay. All right. End of